And hello again, loves, or hello to those who are new to this channel. If you don't know me, I am Ali. I like to do reviews. Mostly it's been movie reviews, and beginning wise it was series reviews, and I am going back to my roots. I don't know if you can count them as roots, it was only a few months ago, but still stands. Yes, this is going to be a season review instead of a movie review. And what is the show I will be reviewing? The Chosen Season 1. It is a wonderful show based upon the Gospels. It is a slightly fictionalized version. Dallas has made it clear that he tries to keep things as close to the Gospels for the most part and scripture, but he does take creative liberties, which, being a creative myself, I completely understand that, and him being upfront about it makes it even more respectable, because he's like, hey, I get there's going to be some things that are not the same, or more or less, I guess, are just me putting story where story was not. Like, for example, he goes on about how certain stories or character backstories that weren't necessarily dived deep into in the scriptures, he kind of like, hey, if I knew this character, or if I would, like, he basically tries to give backstories in an understandable manner, which is completely respectful. I love the show, so I am excited to actually dive into it, and I'm hoping to be able to get all 3 seasons reviewed before the 4th comes out, and maybe do a kind of like reactionary video. I don't know. We will figure out when that turns about. But let's go on to the 5 points. Is this Ali approved? It depends, but not really. He is only 4, so yeah. If it's not animated or having animals, then it usually is going to be a no. So I would say, yeah, kind of not Ali approved. Foul language or phrases? No, not really. It just depends on what you qualify as foul language. There's no like cuss words or anything like that, but there is like brood of vipers. If you know, you know. Magic, again, no. Miracles, there is. It's based off scripture, so even if it does end up having magic referenced, as the Bible does, I doubt it's going to be in a poor way. They do have possession, one in the first episode and another in the second season somewhere. So if you're sensitive to that, I'd avoid those episodes. Like I said, the first episode in season 1, I'll warn you about the second season when I do a review about that. So if you want to skip over parts or skip over the first episode because you're sensitive to that, I can understand that. Me personally, I just don't go to bed on that episode, because sometimes, like, this is a comfort show that sometimes I'll play in the background while I'm trying to sleep. So I don't mind watching it when I'm like awake, but yeah, towards bedtime or at bedtime, yeah, let's not. Is it entertaining? Yes, so much so. Even when I don't feel like I want to watch it, I always enjoy it once it's on. I kind of watch it frequently, especially when new seasons come out. I'll do a run through of the seasons prior. So yeah, that's kind of where the hey, kind of don't want to watch it, but kind of do want to watch it comes into play. Adult humor, it depends. It has adult situations, sort of, but nothing inappropriate in my opinion. So yeah, it just, maybe watch it before you show your kiddos if you're kind of sensitive to that. Otherwise, yeah, maybe not the littles, because like I said, there are some adult scenes, not necessarily like there's no like spicy scenes in it or anything like that, but yeah, if you've read the Bible, there are some intense stuff in it. So yeah, it just depends on what you let your kiddos watch. I've heard some people let their kids watch it. My sister doesn't mind Ollie watching it, and I don't really mind, especially if she doesn't mind. So yeah, he watches it. He's not really super into it, so I don't have to worry about him watching it consistently. And even if he does, like I said, there's worse stuff in the Bible, or at least consistent stuff in the Bible. So yeah, it just depends on the kind of parent you are. Now to the review. Episode 1, we start off in Magdala in 2 BC with a young Mary afraid and coming to her father. Her father comforts her by reminding her of a verse he taught her in the past to say when she's afraid. Specifically, Isaiah 43:1 is what it is. She begins repeating the words with her father, and we get a glimpse of a doll before flashing to the present. Mary wakes up a mess, and we see the doll once more. She's in the city of Capernaum in 28 AD now. She hears a man calling for help and looks at herself more so and sees blood. Yes. We then flash to a man real quick as he too has blood on him as he runs into a Roman officer. And he pleads with him, saying how Mary has demons. Here is where the first scene of possession and demons enters into the episode. An intense way to start a show, so it definitely does a real good job of hooking an audience. Things calm down after the intro, and we are introduced to Nicodemus as he is praying in a chariot before it is stopped by Quintus, the praetor of Capernaum. If you don't know what a praetor is, basically close to like a mayor or something, if you may. He will be a character we run into quite a bit, both of them actually. Quintus brings to his attention that taxes are being unpaid because the Jews aren't supposed to work on Shabbat, which is Friday night into Saturday night, if you aren't privy to that. The Romans keep them to that and don't expect any fishing to be done then, so yeah. Many don't follow the law because they are in major debt, so they fish and don't get taxed for it. A big problem for the government when they feel they are being cheated out of what they feel is theirs. Next, we get a glimpse into Matthew's life, another character that we will follow for some bit, as he goes about his usual morning getting ready and hiding himself to get to work. Crazy? Not really. This man's a tax man and well hated, so is in danger going about certain parts of the town. So I mean, if the safest option was hiding yourself while you get past those parts of town, I don't blame him. Back to Nicodemus, he is preaching to a small crowd of Levites. They are basically the church members, like pastors and deacons to the Israelites. God put apart the Levites specifically to be his servants and lead worships. Shmuel, which is one of the Levites, is running around making sure everything is perfect for Nicodemus. We find out quickly that he is very much a perfectionist, which leads then him into being overbearing with the law and also fairly quick an enemy against Jesus. While everyone is settling in, another Roman officer comes to get Nicodemus to come and help them with Mary. They don't care about the whole, saving her from possession as much as killing things out because, no one wants to deal with a ruckus under their watch. Back to Matthew, we see more about the discrimination against him. I wouldn't say it's well earned, but he does give good reason of why the people don't care for him. Back then, it wasn't simply the title itself that made people dislike him. It was the fact that the Jews felt betrayed, and more so twice over, because not only were they joining forces in a way with the people forcefully over them, but they took more out of the pockets of the people to put into their own. So yeah, I wouldn't be showing the dude hate, but I could easily see why many do. Matthew walks to his tax booth after being kicked out of the wagon he was hiding in because the man he paid to give him a ride didn't want to risk being seen with him, and he gets some glares. But the part I enjoy is a blind man grabbing his clothes and asking if he's the Messiah. I've become fond of finding little threads that start in episodes and even seasons before the story they lead into shows up. Okay, here's a spoiler. Click ahead at the timestamp if you don't want spoilers. 3, 2, 1. But it's like in season 3 how they keep showing Gaius' sick son. I'm pretty certain Dallas is leading the way to Gaius being the one referenced in Luke chapter 7. I could be wrong, but like I said, the thread being weaved throughout the season and maybe even sooner kind of says otherwise. The only thing that confuses me is if that is the case, is Gaius was promoted from being a centurion, but Dallas has been specific in stating, like I said, both in the show and elsewhere, that he tries to stay close to the source material, but he does take some liberties that don't jeopardize the main point of the story. So maybe the fact that he was a centurion at one point is what it's being pinned to, and I mean, I could see how that could be what it's leading into. And back to the episode, Gaius has come along to give Matthew a hard time, which is one thing I love about the dynamic between the two of them. They have similarities in their background, both working and being sided with Rome after their people were conquered. But at first, it's this tension between the two, and the only reason they are even acquainted is because of work. Gaius being Matthew's bodyguard in a sense, trying to like keep watch, make sure like no hate comes towards him, at least while he's on work. Other than these similarities, these two are quite polar opposites, though they do grow to care for each other in the whole brotherly friend kind of way where they say I love you without saying I love you. Honestly, it really is like a brother dynamic between the two. The more you get to know them, Gaius being the tough older brother trying to not get killed, and Matthew being the younger, weird one who often gets them into trouble and pulling them up at the same time. Finally, we meet one of my favorite characters, Simon, or as many know him, my man, Peter. And of course, we get a strong introduction to his character, or more so, both his and his brother, Andrew's, as Simon is in a fight and Andrew is off on the side because he got pulled into his brother's shenanigans, which happens quite often. Simon is going strong and looking to win the fight before his second brother-in-law, which, yeah, he's in a match with his brother-in-law, so that's a hoot. But Simon gets knocked down pretty hard. Simon and Andrew aren't doing well as they are in major debt, and that's the main reason they were betting and fighting in the first place. Another more evidence of the two brothers' polar personalities. Peter is off to fish on Shavuot, and Andrew is trying to scold him on it and being called out about being a disciple of John the Baptist specifically. Another detail I love, Dallas isn't afraid to portray how he would have been perceived at the time. We see often him as a prophet, which he was, and hold him in a high standard of respect, but back then he would have been looked at by most as the crazy dude and ridiculous for his practices. I mean, dude ate locusts and wore fur and lived in the wild, so I mean, I could understand why most normal people would be like, this dude is nutso. But high honors and respect to John the Baptist personally, because I mean, he did awful lot for the kingdom, so he has some love and respect in my heart. So Peter's disrespect towards him closely resembles how many probably would have treated him and talked about him back then. With Nicodemus again, we watch as he heads into the Red Quarter. It's the ghetto of where they're at, and I don't even say that figuratively. This literally is what it is. He goes in to try to exorcise Mary, but the dude is scared to death, and I don't blame him. Girl laughs in his face, and he has no idea what to do next, so he leaves. And I mean, maybe it's not necessarily her. I mean, it isn't her. It's literally the demons in her, like, laughing and like, yeah, I'd be pretty scared out of my pants too. Back to Peter again. He is coming home from a long night, which honestly, I didn't catch the time jumps the first couple of times watching it as it seemed like the same day, but is indeed the following day. He is confronted by his wife Enid, another wonderful character and a great pair to Simon, as she acts as if she is frustrated about him fighting her brothers, but is really just teasing him. We get a sweet scene between the two, and for real, like, I love them together. They are the best. She begins questioning him about fishing. He thinks she's referring to the night prior, but she isn't, and we begin to see slight paranoia in him and notice that he is trying to keep things a secret from her. He doesn't want her to worry, and I assume doesn't want her scolding him like Andrew did before, because we find out later that she is a pretty devoted Jew, and in fact doesn't enjoy him breaking the law, as we find out, like I said, later when she does find out, and yeah, her behavior clearly shows she's disappointed in him. Back to Mary, she's lucid and keeps flashing back to when her dad passed away. Trying to help herself, she grabs a small scroll out of the doll, the same verse her father taught her, but begins to be in pain, and then she flashes to memories of times where she was, yeah. Let's just say it was quite common for Roman soldiers to do what they wanted with women, and she kind of fell victim to that. Feeling defeated and lost, she goes to the bar, and the owner, a friend of hers, offers her some new wine to help her ease her problems. She offers him her doll for his nephew, which, big red flag. Okay, anyone that begins giving things away that are precious to them, even more so if they've been going through a hard time, and even more so beginning to be chipper, do not trust it. It's a huge sign that they are about to end it, if you know what I mean. And this with Mary, it definitely is that. Back to Nicodemus, he too is feeling defeated, something that seems to be brewing for some time, and unable to help Mary kind of set him over the edge as well. He is having a big crisis of faith, or I guess more so religion. He doesn't question God per se, but what they have done with his law and worship, something that actually many should question themselves with church many times. So this is very relatable. Now, I'm not saying church is bad. I'm just saying there are some churches that have kind of veered away from teachings and kind of put law back into where they weren't supposed to, and kind of the whole works over faith when it's supposed to be faith over works. And that too is not to say that you shouldn't have works. As James himself, I think it's James, I want to say, James, sorry, I was thinking of another James, but yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure it's James that says that, if you show me works without faith, I will show you faith with works. Basically saying like, hey, yeah, you can't have works without faith and expect to get somewhere in the kingdom, but if you have faith, you definitely need to have your works too. Like, you don't need to be necessarily checking off all the boxes, but you can't be like out and about partying, drinking, doing all the bad stuff and say, yeah, I have faith, I'll be saved by grace. Like, no, if you have faith and you have grace, you kind of need to be like, hey, let me try to do better. It's like when you're teaching kids, they're not gonna necessarily become this perfect person or like never stumble. They're gonna stumble. We are kids in faith, so we're gonna stumble. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try hard. That doesn't mean that we should put so much pressure on us that we do fall hard and we feel like there's no point in getting back up, basically. The man is questioning if they have put God in a box and portraying that he can't do anything new, which, yeah, I get that. That is another thing that seems to be relevant to today, that if God did something new, how many would shout blasphemy? That religion has kind of sucked out the love and true worship of God. How many are worried more about checking off the boxes and balancing their scales, that they forget why they are following God in the first place. They forget to put more importance on the relationship with God than religious standards we many times put on ourselves. His wife is trying to help, but girl, she is putting more pressure on him to keep it together. And yeah, sometimes you have to let someone fall apart to better put the pieces back together than hold it all together before they combust or shut down completely. I mean, there is a very well balance of a breakdown you need to be worried for and a breakdown you need to be with somebody for. I mean, you need to be with somebody with either breakdown, but what I'm basically getting at is there's the red flag breakdown that you need to be worrisome of with somebody, and then the breakdown that's like, yes, this is relief for you, let's go ahead and just be in this moment, mourn in this moment, so we can better build ourselves up and create some healing. And yeah, I'll definitely say it, pastors should not and cannot know everything. It is more dangerous for them to act like they do than to admit that they are as human as the rest of us and aren't privy to everything. It is healthier for both them and to us to let them know and show their vulnerability and humanity than to expect them to know all and be all. They are not God. Only God is God. So to expect anyone to know everything about God is only going to lead to downfall and idolization. It's like when we find out our parents aren't superhumans, we must stop holding this unrealistic expectation on leaders as if they aren't sinners and haven't fallen short of God's grace themselves. Nicodemus says the words that will later lead him to quickly recognize Jesus as God, as he states only God would have been able to cleanse Mary, which he does. And later when Nicodemus sees this, he quickly wants answers. Everyone going about their next day, we settle with Nicodemus again as he talks to the crowd from before and tries to explain and reasoning of why he couldn't help Mary. Now back to our girl. She's to the edge of the cliff and lets go of the torn pieces of the scroll from earlier before about to, She second guesses when seeing a dove fly overhead and decides to follow it instead. Simon and Andrew go to pay their taxes. Simon tries to tell Andrew that he has something to help them out, but Andrew isn't hearing it as he goes over past claims Simon made that fell through. Let's just say our dude is impulsive and doesn't have well standing because of past reasonings. Andrew trying to catch his taxes up some. It doesn't look like things are going to be okay, as he is far more behind than he thought, but Simon pops up and tells him that he made a deal with Quintus and wipes their slates clean. Matthew isn't believing it, and Andrew, confused as all get out. Things get squared, but yeah, no one's feeling comfortable about it except Peter, which we will later find out more about that story. No more debt for either of them, but you know, at what cost? Our boys head off and Simon explains things. When he went off to fish on Shabbat, Quintus caught him and made a deal with him. At Simon's suggestion, Simon offered that he could bring in merchants if they let him off the hook. So they had a deal, but Andrew is hating it. Now, Simon is just as bad as the tax collectors, as he is now betraying his people too, but desperate times call for desperate measures, and desperate men make crazy decisions. Matthew heads off and tries to verify the guy's story. And back to Mary, she runs into our guys quite literally as they are headed out of the tavern, and she heads inside. She isn't sure why the dove brought her back there, but she sits at the bar. A man comes up harassing her before her friend shakes him off. She wants to get drunk, and he tries to warn her that it's not going to help, but he gives into her pleas. She's at the end of her rope and just wants to feel okay somehow. I understand this completely. Sometimes things just become a little heavy and you just want something, anything to just lighten the weight for you. Right as she's about to drink, another man comes up to stop her, but he's not just any man. It's Jesus. Hey! I get stoked every time with him in scenes, especially the first couple episodes. Is just, I don't know, just seeing him on screen. Not Jonathan. I mean, respect toward Jonathan, but you know, he plays Jesus, and I like Jesus. I love Jesus, so it's like, you just get all giddy, or at least I do. Hurting again, she turns to head off, but he isn't so willing to let her go.
I have to go. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Mary. Mary of Magdala. Who are you? How do you know my name? Thus says the Lord who created you, and he who formed you. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine.
Okay, that scene gets me every time. I just wanted you all to see it because, like, no words would best explain what's going on. Seriously, it moves me every time, and this show, it's slam-packed with different ones just like this that make you just feel things. I really love how Dallas and the crew take these moments in scripture and just play them out so beautifully, and now I'm just wanting a hug from Jesus. The real one, at least. No offense to Jonathan, you know, it's just I'm sure you understand. I always love hearing people explain the first thing they would do when they go to heaven, but I don't know, the thing I want most is just a hug from God and Jesus. I can't be the only one. When things get hard in life, it's one thing to know he's there, but not being able to just like physically feel him, it just hurts. And I mean, spiritually, sometimes you can, but I'm just talking about like, just wanting his arms around you just hits differently. But knowing that one day I'll get to, I just can't wait. I love my family and everyone. We'll get to see again one day, but the joy about one day getting to hug Jesus and God, I'm not sorry. Nothing compares. I mean, yeah. Episode 2. This episode starts off 948 BC in Chinnereth. Where is that? Honestly, the best I came across was that it is the surrounding area or part of it of the Sea of Galilee. And did you know there was another name for the surrounding area of the Sea of Galilee? Do not hold this to me. I did minimal research to come across this and will maybe look it up more later. And I would suggest you do the same if you like digging into the Bible and stuff, because I fairly much enjoy doing that, and coming to know more about it is really fun. But you know, I'm a nerd, so yeah, I love and still love doing research. Doing so for books and world building has become a new favorite hobby of mine. But back to the episode. Here we are introduced to characters we don't already know. We just get a bit of glimpse of the importance of Shabbat and the tradition of it. This episode is called Shabbat and does go over the characters and what they do on it, so it makes sense they would start it off in this way, kind of giving us a bit of background. We then flash to the present and into a hairdresser where the newly formed Mary, she is smiling and everything, and it feels really good to see our girl thriving after such a misery. We flash for a second into the market area right outside and notice a quieting down as the Pharisees, or at least one of them, wanders about before we get back to Mary as she offers to get a flower for one of the ladies' hairs. She heads outside to get one without a clue that a Pharisee is out and about, but he does indeed notice her. It's one of the Pharisees that were with Nicodemus to help her earlier. He's astonished at the sight of her well and about, like nothing bad has happened to her previously, let alone being, slammed with demons like she was. He runs off. With Matthew and Gaius as they try to, or at least Matthew tries to verify things about Simon's claims. He doesn't think Simon can be trusted, and Gaius is just worried that Matthew's doing this is going to end up getting them both killed, which with foresight he almost does, but we'll get to that when we do. Matthew and Gaius get into a little squabble as Gaius is not for this and tells Matthew that he's just going to wait outside for his replacement because dude is trying hard not to get caught in the crossfires and get himself killed, but he's called out right before leaving by Quintus, so yeah. He gets questioned why he's leaving and makes up an excuse that Quintus doesn't buy because he knows how his soldiers fear him. Matthew explains why they are there. It turns out Simon was right, or at least partially right. Quintus didn't agree necessarily to canceling both the boys' debt, but goes along with it anyway. Matthew, being a bold boy, tells Quintus pretty upfront that Simon shouldn't be relied on, and here is where the soldier is about to kill them both for basically calling Quintus out on making a bad deal. But Quintus chills the situation out relatively quickly. He actually likes Matthew's boldness, saying how it's hard to find people so bold to speak to him the way Matthew would, because any regular person would be afraid to die, kind of like how Gaius was, with good reason. Rome was not afraid to kill and often did it relatively fast. Quintus then dismisses them after telling Matthew that he might end up needing his skills in the near future. At the bar with Simon, he buys drinks for a lot of merchants before Matthew calls him out on it. Which, yeah, I'm siding with Andrew. Dude is pretty sucky, making it seem like things are all well before supposed to be pulling those same guys into Rome's custody. Again, we see how his view of the situation is, how even though the guys are his people, it's Andrew and Enid that he has to think of first. So if he has to throw them under the bus, or the boat as you may, sorry, don't hate me for the puns. But if he has to sacrifice his dignity with his people to keep his family safe, he will. We get to see Nicodemus as he is doing a bit of studying up on demons and exorcisms before Shmuel. I'm sorry, I cannot remember how to pronounce his name. It's like Shmuel. I'm really sorry, I can't remember how to pronounce his name. Instead of embarrassing myself any further or making you guys cringe any further, here's his name. Yeah, this dude. He runs in telling him how there are some high-ups wanting him. Nicodemus is completely confused about everything and heads off to see what it is all about, thinking it's bad news before being informed that Mary was redeemed. They assume it was from Nicodemus and what he did, but he's more certain it was not. So good on him for being humble and knowing that not everything that comes about so quickly after what you do is necessarily from you, and sometimes they are just strictly miracles and strictly from God. They talk about how they want to send word out to Jerusalem, basically the big dogs, but he wants to figure everything out before and suggests that he does some more digging before spreading the word to the others. He speaks a basic reason for holding off that they find reasonable, but I feel as though he's not telling them his actual reason. He's definitely wanting to dig deeper because he has suspicions that there's more to the story than they think, a miracle far more meaningful than they are simply thinking. To Andrew and Simon, for a moment, they are watching out to get an idea of who might be wanting to fish on Shabbat the following night. As Andrew calls Simon out once again, he is at his wits' ends with his brother and is just trying to get him to see how ridiculous and how much of a betrayal it is that he's doing, not only to his people, but to many who care and look up to him. Nicodemus and his wife again, he's still struggling, and his wife tries to remind him of the people coming over and the importance they view him as, and he's put off, feeling as though it's more important to be with God and studying about him than a meal with people who aren't viewing the importance and lost meaning of what Shabbat was declared holy for in the first place, kind of for honoring God, not tradition and other nonsense we many times hold over him. Things are a bit rough in the market, and Gaius helps a Roman soldier settle it down with a bit of violence before trying to hackle Matthew again, and gets a bit of a sad realization about Matthew's past and his relationship with his family, or more so the lack of it now. Matthew's dad disowned him when he decided to become a tax collector, so our boy's a bit more lonely than we originally thought, but that's kind of how things went back then. When somebody strayed from what many saw as what were supposed to be done and held as high, they kind of got pushed out for it. This is kind of how many people and families are even today. It's kind of sad. Many that claim to be Christian forget to hold tight to the loving and caring aspect of Christianity. You don't have to accept people's beliefs and way of life to hold true to caring for them. I think I've mentioned this before, but yeah, this is very much what I am. I am a very much, you can love even if it must be afar and still hold true to your morals. Like, you don't have to show hate and just poison. That's just poison. Don't do that. Be the loving, caring Christ. Not the Christ was not this harsh character that some people think he was. Now, the man did flip some tables with good reason, but that was a story for another day. He very much would rather you be herding them lost sheep in than pushing them away. I mean, there are some situations I can see where you might have to cut people out of your lives if they are being a source of harm in your life and don't care about your boundaries, but it's not the same in this situation. If I had a kid and they decided to do something I wasn't okay with, I wouldn't push them out. I can understand the whole don't bring it in my house, but that doesn't mean you can't come in. I'm more so talking about physical objects or mean behavior. I'm very much a person of, if we can't agree, but you let me live my life, I'll let you live your life as long as no harm is coming either way. Mary again, she gets herself ready for Shabbat. She's wanting to host her own, which is a very sweet sentiment. She really is trying to turn herself around. Nicodemus runs into her and she's unsure what his deal is, even more so when he calls her Lilith rather than Mary, which was actually the name she was going by when she was in her demonized life. He's sweet and very much curious as he tries to figure things out. She even pulls her head covering on when finding out he's a Pharisee, but he exclaims how he wasn't even worried about it and is just there to figure things out about her healing. With Simon now, he wakes up super late and Enid is not having it. He tries to be sweet with her, but girl is spicy. She is confused at what is happening with him and is fed up with him not talking about it. He tells her how he has work that night and she gets even spicier. I mean, enough was said. That girl's got some spice to her. I'm sorry, I love this scene. Every time I watch it, I really enjoy her character. She's the perfect mix of sweet and spicy. Like, what do you do? Like, someone says that, especially if you're religious and not doing something right. What do you do? There's not much you can argue with compared to that. I feel like I'm gonna definitely have to use this next time I get in an argument, like using God as your defense. I mean, she's not wrong. Girl's giving him grace about it. It's spicy grace, but still grace. Sometimes that's the only grace someone can give in certain moments. Even us good old godly girls need some time to cool off. We're still human, so you might still get some attitude at times. Matthew off to try to join his family for Shabbat dinner. He runs into a dog. He promises the dog some food if he comes back. And see, our boy's not all that bad. We kind of already knew it. And I'm really hoping that this doggo becomes his best friend, because he needs a best friend, and this dog needs a family, and no better pairing than a lonely boy and a lost dog. He looks in to see his family gathering for a moment, but turns back before knocking, which, come on, it's heartbreaking here. He's not the only one that has anxiety about doing something with others, but afraid of what they're going to say or do, and that kind of anxiety just overrules and you bop off beforehand. Nicodemus is at his Shabbat dinner and looking at a tapestry, sad about the history it portrays the story of when the Israelites were captured before the king suppressed their worship, and he speaks about how he wonders who is suppressing it now and kind of already knows. His wife speaks to this and tells him that it's unfair for him to be upset about the beauty of the tapestry simply because of the history it holds. How the artist shouldn't have made it less beautiful simply because of the sadness of its history. His wife kind of frustrates me in a very specific way. That's not fully her fault. She's one of those characters that I love how she's written and portrayed, because it makes sense that she would be this way, and at the same time, it's because of that I'm frustrated. So, good writing, good acting, props. She's trying her best to help him, but it's also his biggest obstacle he faces many times. Just let your man explore his feelings and unsureness. She grew up in a very specific culture, so it's understandable that this would be the case. It's hard to break away from something you've been taught your whole life, hence the same problem Nicodemus is facing. It also shows a very tricky situation of wise words not being all that wise compared to what God is intending. Very similar to Job's friends in a way. If you don't know that story, it's about a man who goes through a lot. He loses everything, like seriously, practically everything. His job, his kids, and even his health and sleep are all jacked up. His friends try to make him see clearly, and their words sound wise, but in the end, they are just a hindrance. And from God's frustration towards them, it proves that the words they say weren't really wise as much as they thought they were. We are introduced to some company at Nicodemus's dinner, and they show him his importance to them and the respect they have, but do so by insulting the importance of God, and our dude calls them out on it real quick. I love this sassy man for real though. His consistency of trying to set people straight when putting things over God and lowering God by doing so. He is a for real defender of the Lord. Like, good job, Nicodemus. With Mary again, she is starting her dinner and a couple of friends come by before a couple gents that she is confused about. She doesn't know them but allows them in still. She's a bit nervous and confused about some of the customs. It doesn't stop her from trying her best to honor God and his traditions though. And I am all for it. You gotta start somewhere, girl. Honestly, seeing this when knowing something that later happens to her, she very much reminds me of a fresh baby Christian, excited to do all they can to honor God the best way they know how. A diving in the deep kind baby Christian. It's something beautiful and one of my favorite things to see. The only problem with this, though, is not really a problem single to them, but something we all have to be strong against is when things do crumble, as life usually does, and how many times it leaves us feeling defeated. They feel unworthy when push comes to shove and they fall down feeling undeserving of another chance. But babies, you have to come back home. God will forgive you when things fall apart and you stumble into bad habits again or into new ones entirely. He still loves you and wants you fighting for his kingdom. Now you just have more to tell of what he's brought you out of. And no, that doesn't mean go out and be sinning just to add more to your testimony. It means when you do fall, getting back up, you become stronger, even more so when knowing your true dependency on the Lord. We are human and can't do this life thing on our own and it turn out well. Only God can help us in our areas our flesh wants to thrive. We are weak and that's okay. It's expected, but that's how we are designed, to be partnered with someone far greater and stronger than anything else. It's through him that our best can be better and our worst no longer hold us to the ties that it has. Right before she starts, we get a special guest that makes her even more nervous. Jesus, of course. For real though, in these first few episodes, I'm always stoked to see him. You don't see him much because we mostly are watching his followers and other characters, so the impact he has on screen when he does show is just like so much more, so much greater. We find out the two gents from earlier are actually his followers. Mary finally finding her ground. We end off with her reading off a verse as we stay listening to her and flash to the rest of the characters and their ending of the episode. Nicodemus leading his supper, Mary reading off to the guests at her house, Matthew enjoying his dinner with his new doggo friend, and Simon praying with Andrew and Enid before heading off on his own. After the prayer spoken, we leave off with Simon on the shore and the Roman soldier walking up, and that is the end of this episode and this part of the review. And I appreciate you all staying to the end of the video. I know it's a long one and it would be longer if I did not cut it up into parts. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and push that notification bell if you want to know when another episode comes out. And as said before, a new episode for this review should be out the next week after this one's posted. I'm trying to post them a week apart, that way it's not too much on me to get done and not too much on you to watch at one point or at one sitting. So I thank you all for once again listening to the end of this video, and I pray blessings upon you all. Good night.